welcome to the New York Press Club. I'm Rich Lamb from WCBS 880 Radio. That is the required commercial. And we hope you'll listen sometime, if you haven't already. Tonight we are privileged to have as our guest Fox News Channel's Shepard Smith. Please join me in welcoming him once again. Now, I did a little bit of research, not all that much, but so we'll go through a little bit, maybe about a minute, just a little bit of background. Andrew, so something's going on here. We have a technical adjustment. Right, this is okay. That on switch is always that's a good one. Okay, well that was a good pickup. Thank you for fixing that. Would have been kind of embarrassing to have me ask, and then they go to the video later and there's no audio, right? Okay, so his Fox bio credits him with a fast-paced, jam-packed, and highly relatable anchoring style and labels it a glimpse into the future of television news. All right?
Okay.
Don't you love PR people? Anyway, he anchors Fox News Channel's evening newscast, The Fox Report, which airs from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We watched it out here tonight. That explains our later start time tonight because obviously you can't do the show and be here at the same time, but we appreciate your coming after having done that show. Now, according to the Fox website, the Fox Report consistently ranks in the top 5 programs in cable news and has been #1 in the 7 p.m. time slot for more than 100 consecutive months. Now that, for anybody who's in this business, that's a remarkable accomplishment. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Shepard Smith also anchors an afternoon news and interview program, Studio B with Shepard Smith, airs from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. For those of you who want to go out to Ohio, it's a little bit nimmer. He co-hosted FNC's coverage of the royal wedding live from Buckingham Palace recently. A few other stories. That must have been interesting.
Oh, fascinating.
Was that great? I'll just stop for a minute. What was that like? You don't want to
It's
hear me
logistics. You guys know what stuff like that is. It's all logistics, and then you remember why we moved over here. I don't know. I like this better. They're very nice. They have great clothes and weird hats, and and right after they killed Osama bin Laden, so I came directly.
I noticed that they built these little structures in front of the church for the cameras, then sort of made them blank. Talk to us a little bit about, what do they have, 40 cameras in that church?
Oh, I think the BBC was the pool for it, obviously. I think they had close to 200 total along the route. They built these enormous green structures. Everything is green in a palace world, as you know. And they built these enormous structures from which we would anchor our coverage right across the street from Buckingham Palace. And it's pollen season in London. Anybody who's been there this time of year knows the stuff starts falling out of the sky, and it just coats everything. It's much worse than even on Long Island. And we had...
That's bad.
It's bad. They had the doors would be open in the back, and the front of the booth had a plexiglass-ish thing, and then behind that was Buckingham Palace, so you could see all their pum thing. But that yellow stuff would blow in, and because the glass was not glass, it was some sort of plexiglass, the yellow stuff would stick to it. So every once in a while you had to get a duster, and otherwise you had this wavy, it was imperfect by every standard, but it was fun being in London.
Well, there you are. All right, so now on the other end of the human scale, earlier this year he reported live from Japan following the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear threat. Let's stop again. What do you think? Tell me about, what was that like?
I stayed in Tokyo because when we left, there wasn't yet, from the United States, a warning that within a certain radius you really shouldn't be there. And we already had people in the north, and the boss said, nope, you're staying in Tokyo, so stay in Tokyo. It was cold is what it was. It was bitterly, bitterly cold. And all you could think about really was all of these people who potentially at least are trapped in that kind of weather. It was snowing up in the northeast, as I'm sure you know, as they were still trying to rescue people. It was incredible.
Now, when you talk about the other side of the globe, there's that time problem, the clock.
13 hours.
13 hours. So what did you end up having to do? When were you?
We work on Eastern time no matter where we are. That's what we do. So I worked 7 p.m. Eastern time. They're plus 13. So you were just working on Eastern time. You slept in the daytime, worked at nighttime. But if you stay on Eastern time clock, it doesn't really matter. There were blackout shades in the hotel. I was happy about that. And most places weren't open. Most people who live in Tokyo were somewhere. I don't know where they were, but they weren't out and about. And it wasn't the Tokyo that if you've been there, you might know, because it was very easy to drive around and the traffic was fine. And it was mostly very sad. The one thing that you know about that culture is that I remember asking on the second day, this is so incredible. Do you have family in the Northeast who are affected? It's a very unfortunate circumstance. Thank you for staying at our hotel. They have an amazing resilience and pride about them that I guess goes back to the war that we all know about, at least that far. I guess that's how far back we sort of know their culture. And they were impressive and almost surreal in many ways. Their politeness and openness and welcoming in the middle of this unthinkable catastrophe, where I was trying to picture what we might be like in such a situation, just because we sort of carry ourselves differently around here. And it wouldn't have been like that.
I was just going to say, now we have the contrast of these two events. One is planned long in advance. You probably, I guess you had a study book.
I did not read a word. Martha McCallum knew every bit of it. I was there to make fun of them. It was quite an enjoyable experience, frankly.
We're now talking about the royal wedding.
Yes.
And then, how much notice did you get on the Japan trip? What do you know? You get a call and bang, bang, and then you're on the plane.
I didn't go the first day. Our correspondents were there on the first day. They sent me when it became clear that this was going to be as if a tsunami and the rest isn't enough. It was clear that it was going to be the center of the news for a while, we thought. And as a result, they could send me. I don't like to parachute in and out of places. To use a disaster as a backdrop is not what I like to do. If I'm going to be there, I want to go out and report. I feel like there's a lot of value in an anchor getting dirty and finding out what's happening, but I don't think there's any value at all in using it as a stage. And so I don't like to travel when I can't go out and report. And that's why, to some degree, I enjoyed the coverage of the floods, because you could at least go get wet and find out what real people are dealing with, and then you can bring that information to your viewer. To have a correspondent tell me, the correspondent can tell me that from thousands of miles away, so I'm not really into that. As it turned out, Tokyo largely became a backdrop for me. I didn't get to go to the north and east and report as badly as I wanted to, and that was about a warning that it might kill us. And frankly, we all know we play in other people's sandboxes and they tell you what to do, and they have their reasons for it, and I respect that, and that's fine.
Reporting, anchoring.
Oh, reporting. I never wanted to do this. I enjoy it very much. When I was coming up and reporting, you couldn't really report from the studio at all. You couldn't work sources and have BlackBerries and iPhones and computers going and follow Twitter and trust your sources and deal with all your correspondents out there and do personal messages and find out what. You couldn't do that then. You had to be there. But now, to a degree, it's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because they told me to. But you can do more reporting from inside the building than you once could. It's still imperfect in every way, but you can do more of it. And I like studio work. I like the environment. I didn't like it at first. I had never done it. I'd carefully avoided the anchor desk because I got in this to chase ambulances and find out what's happening and tell people about it, not to sit in a studio with makeup.
Are you in any way surprised at your success? I mean, 100 months?
Fully surprised. 110 now. They need to update. But
I need to check my facts.
I'm well aware that that's not about me. I mean, our place has developed a following that's enormous, and what makes me and the rest of our journalists feel so good is that people who may be coming to us for opinions another time of the day in the evening will come to us for what really is. And I'm not in the business of knocking my friends and colleagues who work at other places. I know we're all in this to do the same thing, to find out what happens and tell people about it. And it doesn't really matter where you work. That's what you're going to do. If you're a journalist, that's what you do. But that they will stay with us and watch what really is the only hour that doesn't have pundits and doesn't have guests and doesn't do opinion. It's the only hour on any channel. And they've stuck with it. When we know that they could put opinion in that time slot tomorrow, I know this to the core of my being. They wanted to put opinion in my time slot tomorrow, they could make more money and spend less money. But they don't do it. They leave an hour newscast in there, and I appreciate it. I think the rest of our journalists appreciate it. And it's a nice spot for us to just showcase, all right, say, think, do, whatever you want. These are our journalists. We'll stack them up against anybody, and I will. They're amazing.
So why are they doing it if they can make more money?
Because we're a news network and we need an evening newscast. And I think that the country could use more of that. Right now, as one of our competitors has said so famously, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Facts, by definition, they exist on an island by themselves. And to have a time when I think so many people go to the websites and the sources that they want to go to hear what they already think, to just justify their own thoughts and feelings, to have a place where we're not going to do that for you. And if we've done that, we've made an error and we're duty bound to correct it as quickly as possible. And I take this as a very serious thing. I studied under good journalists in college, and I worked my way up in small markets where what they emphasize is you must get it right. And they might have emphasized it because the lawyers, you get sued if you don't. But for whatever reason they emphasized it, it matters to me and it means a lot. And we're very heavily scrutinized. I don't have to tell anybody that. And you don't see our name up in lights a lot for making big mistakes. And if you do, we correct them quickly. And I'm very proud of the work we do. And we don't do it with a lot of extra people. And I like that. We're lean, and I think our journalists are thorough, and they impress me daily.
Now, let's get down to it a little bit here about Fox News Channel. You know, Fox News does have a reputation, or not Fox News, I guess, overall.
Channel.
Not channel, yes. Has a reputation for being a little bit maybe right of center.
Our opinion people?
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah. And you have a reputation, I think, for being very careful to not do that.
I hope so.
And this is something that you talk about all the time with the management, or the management never pushes you toward?
Oh, they talk to you if you start getting it wrong. The phone will ring quickly. I think every journalist understands what it's like when you make a mistake and the lawyers call or the boss calls and you got to retract and things. I get those calls like I think probably every other journalist in America gets them. But what to say and how to say it, I don't get that. I wouldn't be involved with that. That would be my last day. And I think that's the reason that it works so well. You can't really know a place until you live it. And I was there the day the lights came on as a field reporter running from place to place, doing 250 days a year on an airplane or in another city. We've all done it. I'm not special for having done it. But I did learn a lot doing it, and I learned about the important trust that is placed in us. When we come on at night and say these are the facts, they better be, because otherwise you're selling your soul. And I would never do that in a million years, intentionally. We all make mistakes. But when I talk to Roger Ailes, what he always says is, you're my news guy, you got to get it right. You can't go left, you can't go right. Don't do it. It's the most important thing here. Because when we put it out there, we're very careful to tell you, O'Reilly and Hannity, these are opinion people. And we also, and we fulfill our promise. They absolutely are. And at 7 o'clock every night, we got to do the news. And if we ever stray, and making a mistake is a stray. When we do, you hear from them. And I think that's a great thing. We're employees of a big company, and we have our own reputations, and our employer has a reputation, and we've never had a big, you got to retract this from our news division, and hope it didn't happen tonight. We'll see.
All right, you brought up Roger Ailes, so
Yes.
I wrote a couple sentences so I get this just the way I want to
All
say it. All right. Now, for a long time, there have been some speculations about the influence of Roger Ailes on the Republican Party. I mean, first of all, he was an advisor to a couple of three Republican presidents.
He was
I think.
indeed.
So that would be Nixon, Reagan, and George H.W. Bush, I think.
Right. Bush the father.
Right, Bush the father. 41, right?
41.
And now there's a guy named Gabriel Sherman, a writer for New York Magazine, and I was reading about this very recently.
I read it.
You read it.
Mm-hmm.
So you know he writes, and this is a quote, he is also in a sense the head of the Republican Party, having employed 5 prospective presidential candidates and having done more than anyone to alter the balance of power in the national media in favor of the Republicans. So I guess the image that projects, or at least that Ailes projects, is that the Fox and the Republicans are all in bed. But you were very careful not to do that, I guess.
We're not in bed. I guarantee you. The bed is not a good place crowded. I talk to him not daily, not weekly, just when I talk to him. I've never seen evidence of this. I have no indication that this is what happens. What I see every day as one who is right there, every moment of every day, is that what Roger Ailes likes to do is make television. He was with the Mike Douglas show. He's had a number of different lives along the way. I'm not going to give you my opinion on any of the people we hire because they're my colleagues and that's that. But Sarah Palin, for instance, makes the numbers go up. She makes more people tune in. And that's what we do. We sell television. During my hour, we're selling news. But during the hour that's after me and the one after that, we're selling television. And she's very good television. I know she's good television because I watch the radio go bing. And that means you get to sell advertising for more. And that means the news division gets more money. And that means we have more resources. And that means we can get better facts to the air and have more correspondence on the ground. And this all works for me. I don't have a problem with any of it. That guy treats me like a father. That guy acts as if he's my father in many ways.
We're talking about Roger Ailes?
He's been a guiding hand from the beginning of my career. When I've had problems, he's been there to help me. When I've made mistakes, he's been there to scold me. And they're all about getting the facts right and keeping the temperament the way to reflect the news, to never overdo it and never to underplay it, to make sure to sell everything for what it's worth, to get the tone right, to be empathetic and sympathetic, and mainly to get it right. And he's never said to me anything except, don't go left and don't go right. There's plenty of time for that in the cable universe. Your job is to get the facts right. That's been the entire thing from the very beginning of my career there. And had there been a moment that there was a push to one way or the other, Roger knows that would have had to have been it. But that's not who Roger is. That's not how Roger conducts himself. I guarantee you that he wants them to be right at night. He planned it that way. It is laid out that way. It's what he wants them to be. But I think it's because there wasn't much of that when we came along. It existed all over the radio. It was on some opinion pages. I guess you could say the Wall Street Journal and some others, you know.
Radio always leads television.
Well, it always has. And video did not kill the radio star. But he saw an opportunity to make money. And we make a lot of money. And that means our news division gets to spend money. I know that that narrative isn't very much fun. That doesn't sell newspapers. That doesn't bring people to blogs. These grand conspiracy theories about this one and that one. He's the nicest guy I know. And if I'm in a foxhole, I want to be there with him. And when I get in trouble, he's there to bail me out. And when I make trouble, he's there to dress me down. And I love the relationship, and I don't want to work for anybody else. He's just completely fair and so honest, and he's just good with me, and I love him to death.
You may have just already answered this, but within Fox, is he loved or feared or some combination of both?
Well, I mean, feared. If you're one who's screwing up, you ought to be afraid. That was the case when I worked in Los Angeles and when I worked in Miami and when I worked in Orlando and when I worked in Fort Myers and when I worked. If you're one who's going to screw up, you ought to be afraid somebody else is going to get your job because somebody else will. We're in a contracting phase in our industry, sadly, not an expansion phase. And there are a lot of great journalists out there, very good friends who used to work for ABC and used to work for NBC, who are incredible journalists, whom I admire and respect so much, who now are not having the good time of things that we have in the past. And I understand the economics. We're not fools here. We can see it. But I'm also very glad that we haven't had any layoffs. We're the one that hasn't. And I know the reason is because we're still making a lot of money. But as a result, my friends aren't getting tossed out on the streets. And that's been great. And I don't know anybody who has reason to fear. That's not the climate in our place. I think anybody who's been there, I've got a group of students in the back from Ole Miss who last week I taught them down in Oxford. It's an intersession. It's between the end of the spring semester and before the summer session begins. They have a 2-week thing. I really think it's so they can make some money on two more weeks of school. It's a state school. We need money. If you'd like to donate, you're welcome to do so. But I went down there and taught them last week. And Roger, getting into our organization, we were in an anthrax building, and we have very tight security, as I'm sure you've read about. But everybody does. And to be able to get kids in who, they're not on our payroll, they're not insured, and they have basic free reign of the place, I mean, with restrictions, but they're in and out. They were in our editorial meeting this morning. It's fine. And our place is a happy place. There's no fear in the hall. I think people love going to work there. What Roger Ailes always says, you know, happy people make miserable people happier, and miserable people make happy people angry. He goes, if you're going to be miserable, go sell shoes or go sell insurance. Here we're making TV. You guys are making TV, and you guys are telling the news. If you don't like it, you don't want to be happy about it, then go. We want a happy environment. I've worked in miserable environments in television. They exist. There are many of them, and you guys know it. That's the case in print too, where everybody's walking on eggshells, everybody's worried about getting fired, producers are yelling at you all the time, bosses are coming. We don't have any of that. None of it. It's fine. I love it. I wouldn't work in that environment. He already made me rich. Yeah. I'd go do something else. It's awesome there. I know that's not a fun narrative, but it's a fact.
No tension in that story.
There's no tension. It's great. I've had the same executive producer who started as an overnight, as the stage manager for the Snyder Report. Our head of news editorial was an overnight tape runner, worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. the day the lights came on. People like it there. That's why they stay. That's why you see the same faces every year, year after year. That and where the ratings are good, but people don't move around. It's not like people aren't knocking on the door going, yo, come on over here. We like it there. I love it there. Sorry.
I want to ask you a question that I love to ask news people, which is, what do or did your parents do, and what made you go toward this business, which some people call a craft and a business? No one ever wants to call it, anybody who's in it doesn't seem to want to call it a profession, even though if there's a hooker, they'll say it's the oldest profession. I don't know why we don't qualify, but, well, I guess it's good we don't qualify. But what were the influences that drew you into this business, I guess?
My dad was a cotton merchant. I grew up in rural northern Mississippi in a small town called Holly Springs. It would now maybe be considered a Memphis suburb, but it's not. My dad was a cotton merchant, which means he bought the cotton from the farmers and sold it to the next step. And my mom was a bookkeeper, and she worked for him. And they did that my entire life until the loan came in and destroyed my dad's business. And then he started doing a lot of other things to make ends meet. And he did make ends meet, and we didn't want for things, but it wasn't a crazy jump around the planet kind of thing. And I don't know, I've told many times the story of sitting on the living room floor when I'm 13 years old, and Elvis's funeral was coming down Union Avenue in Memphis, and they had a new mini-cam, Channel 5, Action News 5, had a live camera for the first time ever. I'd never seen one locally. I'd seen it on the networks, but I'd never seen it locally. And as I remember it, I'm like, wow, if we can do that now, we're going to be live at these wars that my parents talk about around the table someday, and I want to be a part of it. So I was drawn to it initially through the technology, but I was always kind of into the storytelling classes. I did a lot better in English and history than I did in math and science, and it seemed kind of a natural, and I started working at the radio and started working on the little newspaper in my little school where we had 60 people in the graduating class, and found out Ole Miss, which is where Mommy went and Daddy went. It's where I was going. It's a state school. Maybe we can afford it. And I decided to go through that program and see if it was any good and if I could do anything with it. And originally it didn't much look like it. But I was digging, and I was coming up with good stories and learning the technology with an Ikegami 735A and a BVU 110. And I don't know, we'd just gotten the film out of the soup when I was there, so tape was kind of new. And I loved it. I tasted it and went nuts. This idea of finding out things, putting it into context, giving it some perspective, and tossing it back at people. And then and even in the early going on campus, people would come up to you and go, wow, that thing, what about that thing? And what about this? And it was a light bulb. It was, you know what I'm talking about. You don't stay for the glamour. And I loved it, and I couldn't put it down. Started in Panama City, Florida, and then Fort Myers and Orlando, and just went local to local, chasing ambulances and knocking shiesty roofers off buildings. And I loved it. I couldn't stop doing it. I've never been able to stop doing it, and I keep thinking maybe someday I'll stop doing it. And then I look up, and there's Bob Schieffer still doing it, and all the people I respect and admire so much, and I'm like, I hope I'm not 80 still doing this. I will have missed out a lot because of it, but I might be.
You mentioned Schieffer, so that leads me to a question. Who is it? Who are the people in your pantheon of heroes in the business?
Well, I watched Brokaw was growing up. We didn't get but 2 stations when I was really little, and we got CBS and PBS, and then we eventually, because it was an antenna and we were a long way from Memphis, but we got some Cronkite, and I loved Brokaw. I didn't get Cronkite. I didn't really get it. I was little. But I loved Brokaw. I liked seeing him at places, and I thought he had a really exciting life. But I really wasn't looking to be him. I was trying to do, I didn't want to anchor. I wanted to report, and I really thought that that wasn't the way I was going to be able to do it. I never felt like I'm a voice of God type. I always felt like we could do this, that I couldn't do that. But I could do this sort of conversational, just tell you what I just saw. And if somebody wanted that, then I felt like I could do that okay. Panama City didn't really want that. Fort Myers was a little more interested, but not. And then Orlando, when I was working at the CBS station, now WKMG, then WCPX, they didn't have any money, and they had cut and cut and cut for years, and they let us run a little, try different things because nobody was watching anyway. So they were like, try it, kind of like the beginning of Fox News Channel. We'd try anything. All you had to do was just call Roger and go, hey, can we go cover this? Yep, go. There was no process. That's sort of the way it was in Orlando, and I kind of found a storytelling way that fit me. Whether anybody else was ever going to like it or not, I don't think I was considering at the time, thankfully. But I've always kind of done it that way. And then when Roger, I was in the field, I'd been covering the OJ trial, and I think I was moving toward Columbine. And after Columbine, Paula Zahn was working us at the time, and Paula had a vacation scheduled, and Paula took a vacation. And after that, somehow I ended up in her time slot. And I was anchoring from Columbine 11, 1, 4, 7, and 11. And I didn't have a producer there, and it was just a couple of us, and it was a lot of anchoring, and Roger liked it. And he called me in afterward and said, I want to try you in this Fox Report. It's not your show. It's not going to get your name on it. I'm not promising you tomorrow or the next week. I'm not promising you anything. But just go do it your way. The producers will probably be a problem, but explain to them that we're going to do this differently. All right, how are we going to do it differently? He goes, well, I want you to do what you did in the field and want you to communicate the way you do in the field in the studio. Like, all right. Well, I don't really know studios, and in studios they have teleprompters, and in the field I'm seeing something, finding out about it, and then telling you about it. That's not how it works in the studio. Well, you'll figure it out. And I'm supposed to tell the producers that we're changing the way we do things? Oh, I'll say something. All right. And he said, now, don't think you got free reign here. I'm the boss, and when I don't like something, I'll call you. And he didn't call. And I've been sitting in that chair ever since. That's exactly how it went down. And now it has my name on it. So
I just want to warn the House here, start thinking of questions. Because after this one, I'm going to throw it out to you guys, all right? So, but listen to the answers. Don't just think of the next question, right? You do have to listen to the answer.
Yeah, that was our lesson today, listening.
Right?
Listening.
You have to listen.
Because when you listen, you might get that in.
Yeah, you might hear like Bob Schieffer and another question might pop in your mind, you know? A few months ago in this very room, and you may have heard about this, before this very club, the New York Press Club, New York Times executive editor Bill Keller had a few choice remarks about Fox News Channel. I don't know if you've heard these quotes, but as Keller put it on March 3rd, quote, I think if you're a regular viewer of Fox News, you're among the most cynical people on the planet Earth. He added, I cannot think of a more cynical slogan than fair and balanced. I guess I want to get your personal reaction to that. I mean, I guess the Times and Fox have had a little war going on.
My goal, and the goal of every journalist I know, every day of your life, is to be fair and to be balanced and to bring context and bring perspective. And if Bill Keller doesn't think I'm succeeding on a daily basis, he has my phone number. I don't enjoy being insulted by people who talk in generalities. My guess is that the people on his opinion page don't get that kind of a broad and sweeping rebuke. He has some very outspoken people on that page, and they are respected. And we have some outspoken opinion people, and he chooses to paint all of us with the same brush. We have journalists just like he does. And I've worked very hard my whole life to try to remain exactly that. I did it when I worked for CBS, and I did it when I worked for NBC, and I'm doing it now, and if someday I'm doing it for somebody else, I'll do it there. Journalists know what we do. We find out about things, we give them context and perspective, and we report on them. That's all I've ever wanted to do in 25 years in this business. It's all I'm ever going to do, and that's all Roger Ailes wants me to do. And I hope that's what Bill Keller wants out of his journalists, just like Roger Ailes wants out of his. It's not nice. It's not nice. Hi.
Shelley?
Shelley Strickler.
Hello again.
Oh, we go. Yes, again. We keep meeting this way. Excuse me? I agree with you wholeheartedly. I have seen your show. I'm not necessarily a big Fox fan in general.
I watch a lot of ESPN.
But you are correct. You really do run a good show that I enjoy watching. Now, you mentioned, I love this quote that ends, people are not entitled to their own facts, and you never do that. But I ask you this, because I know it disturbs me, and if you don't want to answer it, I understand it, because you said you don't want to talk about your colleagues. But does it not disturb you when, yes, they're opinion people, when they are making up their own facts?
Well, I think when I go, I watch a little bit of everybody from time to time, just to find out what the landscape is, to find out how high the vitriol is and who's mad at who. It's kind of a soap opera. The soap operas in the daytime have ended, and the ones at night continue, and everybody seems to enjoy themselves. And I sometimes find it entertaining. But we're consumers of information, and I know that if I go to the evening news, I'm going to get the news, and I know if I go to opinion, it's going to be a soup. And I don't really, it doesn't really bother me what the opinion people say and portray to be facts. I think we have a responsibility as consumers of information to understand who the source is, and then to treat it with the respect that it deserves.
Follow-up, just one quick follow-up. Yes, you're right. And all of us in this room can tell opinion from, from a regular news program. I do lectures on the media, and I find constantly that people are totally confused. I mean, someone will make a remark, and they will say, I said, where did you hear that? Oh, well, I heard it. Well, once they said, I heard it on WOR, where I work. I said, you didn't hear it on the news. I said, you didn't hear it on the news. Oh, yes, I did. All I'm saying, and again, you don't have to answer it, but it's just something that disturbs me, is this: we all know the difference, but many people out there don't. And I think it's really, a distortion.
Yeah, I wonder if the network news anchors on the other ones have trouble with that CSI Miami show in the same way. Because I think of our primetime entertainment shows and opinion shows in that way. And it's my hope that people don't mistake the back page of the New York Times for the front page of the New York Times. But I guess that could happen from time to time. They probably ought to figure out the back page is where the opinion is and the front page is where the news is. And I don't know. As journalists, we can really only control what it is that we report and how it is that we report it, and try to be honest with our viewers every day. And more than anything, when we make a mistake, to quickly and in context and in the same way that we reported it, report a retraction or a correction. I think that's what we're duty bound to do. But I've never felt like part of my job is to go around correcting what other people have reported. I think it's a bit pompous of me. It would be a bit pompous of me to do that. If I watched others make a mistake and spent my time correcting them, it'd take a lot of my news hole out. My news hole is already too short. I have 19 and a half minutes of commercials every hour. And every moment I could shave away, I would appreciate.
I haven't seen Mitch move that fast in years.
Good workout.
My name's Alice Labrie, and I'm an op-ed writer, and I say this for a reason. I'm former U.S. Department of State Foreign Service. And just quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to Fox, which is one of my favorite news stations, because during the Egyptian stuff, and I was thinking, okay, enough already with the democracy. What about the impact on your business, your tourism, blah, blah. Sure enough, I turned on Fox, and they were covering that aspect. So I wrote to the chairman of another news network, I won't say the name, and I said, you see, where is our perspective on the business side? And so I just want to give a shout out to Bill Keller about that. Now my question is that I read recently there was a confab by all the networks about the issue of sending reporters into volatile areas. Does Fox have a protocol for that, or?
I know that if they ask us to go to a place that's dangerous, quote unquote, we can say no. We don't ever have to go into a war zone. I've always been told it's sort of up to me. And I think I don't know about the word policy because I'm not really up on the handbook, but I know that any time that when I was this war or this flood or that disaster, you can say no. I don't know how many times you can say no and keep working at a news organization, but in theory you can say no. And I've actually been. I was at the war, the Israeli-Lebanon border Hezbollah war, a few summers ago when we got hit a lot. I mean, a lot of bombs fell on us, and a couple of our people, one who was a daddy with a baby in the oven, said, "I'm going home," and they said okay, and got him a flight home that day. So they're really good about letting you decide about putting yourself into harm's way. If it's a war zone, if there are fires, if there's floods, if it's Katrina or Andrew or Hugo or lately Smithville, Mississippi or the Midwest, you can say no. And I don't know about the confab. I know that after the horrors that befell our friend and colleague at CBS, Lara Logan, that there was a lot of discussing, and I think that's right and proper that there would be. It's not a comfortable thing to talk about sometimes, the differences in cultures and the way that women are treated differently in some cultures than they are in ours. But again, we're not in a matter of opinion now, we're in a matter of fact. And women are treated differently in some parts of the world. And if my sister or my wife or whatever were going, I'd want the facts about that region to be well understood. Lara Logan is a brilliant woman, and she understood those facts, and it's still just unbelievable what happened to her. And I think we should all be very careful about what it is that we do and the way that it is we conduct ourselves. We have some of our own journalists were attacked in that very thing, and it's one of the risks that we take. We know that risk. We know that in some ways we're putting ourselves out for the people who consume our information in the same way that the men and women who fight for this country do so. And I wouldn't pretend to elevate what I do to anything that they do, but I think it has a certain level of importance, and we should be careful and know the rules of the road. They're different sometimes than they are here at home.
I wanted to ask you, going back to the opinion question, do you think it's, there's an old saying, leave your opinions at the door. Right? Do you think it's possible to scrub out your own biases?
No, of course not. No, you mean for me to not have opinions and biases?
Right.
No, I can't. I mean, I think it would be a really sort of crazy thing to go through the high school and college and 20 years of journalism and not to form opinions. How could you not form opinions? But I don't think they belong in my 7 o'clock newscast, and I do the best that I can to just stick to the facts. And I'm not saying that I always succeed, but it is always my goal. So.
Years ago, I watched you on
Mike,
Fox.
Mike, please,
Thank you, Mitch.
so everybody can hear.
Okay. Years ago, I watched you report on a man's death. You were reporting the actual, almost a play-by-play, as he was being put to death. Was it harder to cover something like that?
No.
Or a war? Which is more difficult for you?
She's talking about the death of Tim McVeigh. I was, the day of the Oklahoma City bombing, I was working for a local station, and it was a very aggressive local station, and we sent a bunch of people there. So I was there the day the building blew up, a few hours later, and I was there for, I think, 3 solid weeks after the building blew up. And then fast forward to trial time, I was working for the Fox News Channel, and I was living out of the West End in Denver and covering that trial. And by the time, a young reporter named David Gregory was covering that trial, and he happened to stand right next to me. He was very tall. But we were covering that trial, so I went through that trial. I wasn't there every day of that trial, don't get me wrong, but I was there for a lot of the coverage. And then there was a media lottery, and they chose who would witness the death of Tim McVeigh. And I was at my brother's bachelor party in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and my brother Benton and I were driving north after a round of golf. I don't much play golf, but we were playing golf that day. It was 107 in Mississippi, and if you've ever been in Mississippi in the middle of the summer when the mosquitoes are, you would never. And the phone rings, and it's John Moody, who was our then senior executive vice president of news editorial, and I look down, and it's John Moody's number. This is not what you want to see when you're at your brother's bachelor party, because he is not calling to say, "Yo, how you doing?" I'm like, "All right, hello, Shep, yes, John Moody." Is that pretty good? John Moody. Yes, sir. He goes, "Remember that lottery with the Tim McVeigh?" I goes, "Well, you're going." I'm like, "All right." So I thought about it long and hard, and I knew what they were doing. They were manipulating us to try to put us in a very stressful, I thought, this is opinion now, but observer.
He's labeling that opinion, by the way. You notice that?
Got us. I'm not on the news now, so it doesn't really matter. But they got us there in the middle of the night, and we were there long before the sun rose. And they put us on a bus, and they sanitized everything and got down to the last of it. But I thought really what my responsibility was that day was to document every moment and try to tell you exactly what happened, how the needle went in, when the phone ring came. Mainly because what's happening there at its core is the government is killing a citizen on behalf of the rest of the citizens. And the citizens don't get to see the government kill another citizen, but they need to know exactly how it went down so that they can then use that little bit of fact to help decide whether they're for this or against this, because after all, this government is of, by, and for us, at least according to the piece of paper. So I felt like that was I had a big responsibility that day. And I tried to do it the best I could. Russ Mitchell, I think, was there as well, somebody from CBS News, and a couple of ABC reporters. And what I tried to do was just exactly the facts. It went like this, it went like that, it went like the other thing. There was a gasp here. He looked up. He looked each of us in the eye. There were glass walls around. He looked each of us in the eye, seemed to be taking over the room. That was an observation. He finished. He took a big breath. He lay back, and he just waited for it to happen. And it was my sort of read on it at the time that he had just looked around the room, said that he owned it, and then checked out. And that was sort of what I reported. But what people wanted to know was, how did it feel? Was it horrible? Were you traumatized by it? Were you excited by it? What was it? And I've never answered those questions because that could be a distorting shadow on what I was trying to do. I think in that particular case, like, my feelings on the death penalty are as irrelevant as anything in the world. Now, there are people who understand those feelings, people who I love and I've talked to those about, as you probably have as journalists as well, but it really didn't have any place there. And since that day, I've never talked about it again. I've never talked about my feelings about the death penalty. But the greatness of that was being able to start a story on the day it happened and finish the story on the day the convicted man was put to death, as a journalist, that is a very fulfilling experience. And so as horrible or great as it might have been, it was a great exercise in journalism for me as a young journalist who had been through a lot with that story. And my most vivid moments, among my most vivid moments ever in journalism, were about day 12, 11 of the Murrah building, when the wind had shifted and the building smelled of what it contained. And it was blowing right at us, and it was oppressive beyond oppressive. And a family that we had been following as a daily story had found out that day, yes, we have remains, yes, it's official, yes, he's dead. Which was a bit of closure, and it was very emotional, and that was the first breakdown of that. And we were having a little quiet breakdown as a group of just us around the satellite truck. And this family came by. They had a big fence there, and people would bring Heartland, Oklahoma City, God love you and all you're going through right now. But these two children and mom and dad, they're bringing flowers and cookies for firefighters. Flowers for the fence and cookies for the first responders. And they saw us having a bad moment. And mom and dad brought the kids over to us and gave us the cookies and the flowers. And I'm just like, you know, I was overwhelmed. It was all of this suffering, and they're taking a moment out to recognize that journalists suffer sometimes too. And it's not the kind of thing that we who parachute in and out of people's lives experience. We experience vitriol, and I get it. We seem like pariahs, I understand it. But it's so important to try to treat every human being with the respect that he or she deserves, especially in the moment of such great turmoil. And to have that little moment, it was life-changing. So that entire experience that ended with McVeigh and began with the blowing up of the federal building was a very enriching experience for me as a journalist.
One more. If you didn't work for Fox, who would you work for?
I'd work for whoever wanted to pay the most and treat me the best. I mean, if you're going to let me do my job, if you're just going to let me be a journalist, which is all I've ever wanted to be, and be on TV, I like to be. I like to be on TV less now. But if you're going to let me do what I love to do and actually pay me for it, I'll work for you. Except I've already found somebody who I'm sure has my back, and I'm sure is not going to interfere with what I do, and I'm sure is going to treat me with respect. And the first question is always going to be, how's your family? I love the environment, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
We have a question from Norway, I think.
Norway, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi. Two questions, actually. The first is you talked about how you acquired your show, and it certainly seems like you embraced it and you're having fun, but do you miss being in the field as your primary role?
Enormously.
And my second question is just your reaction. You said you read that New York Magazine article. Some more of your thoughts on that, just what struck you about that when you read it.
Well, I remember when we were coming up, a friend at CNN, and I can't say this with certainty, but a friend who will go nameless in the very early days of the Fox News Channel told me that they had a thing on the wall in the Washington bureau of the CNN, where I have a lot of friends, and I'm not knocking anybody, but they had a thing on the wall that said the 10 stupidest things Fox News said today. And they would have to erase it and put new things up. And we said some stupid things in the beginning. I certainly remember saying some stupid things, but around that time, Roger would say to us, we're going to win the whole thing. We're going to get them all watching us. You just watch. And frankly, he's a smart guy and everything, but I didn't know a lot about him. And I just didn't see really how we were going to knock off an industry leader. After all, I watched them in the Gulf War, and or CNN, and okay, we'll have a good time trying to get there. But he told us, and then once we get to the top of that mountain, there's not going to be any cover, because at the top of mountains there is no cover. It's above the tree lines, and you just open. And they're just going to shoot at you. They're going to be shooting at you all the time. And he was right. And they shoot at us all the time. And I wake up in the morning and get to work, and I talk with my staff about facts and things that happen, and I call correspondents and producers, and I sit at the chair and I anchor the news, and I go home and get up in the morning and do it again. And as a result, I don't really care what they say, because I know what I'm doing every day, and that's it. So I wish they wouldn't shoot at us, but it's interesting to me that an industry which has such, in the grand scheme of things, such a tiny audience. There are what, 300 and something million of us? And maybe even during O'Reilly and everyone else, maybe total of 4 million people out of 300 something million are watching, all of us combined, and all they do is talk about us? All right. All right. I don't get it, but all right.
Right, I had said Norway before, and somehow Norway didn't have the microphone. So.
Yes. Have you been to Norway? No, that's not my
No,
question.
I'd love to go, though.
It's not my question. The fact that I have a bunch of colleagues over here is that, you know, the ratings for evening news, they decline. You have great ratings. But how do you see the future for these traditional evening news?
Well, they've been trying to kill them off for a long time. You can add up Katie, Brian, and Diane's audience, and it's a lot more than we ever have. And I think they could still make some money on it if they trim it down a little and get their emphasis down and not always have 10 people on every stand-up. But there's an audience for it, and I don't see it going anywhere. I think it'll take on some new dimensions. I know David Rhodes over at CBS pretty well, and I think they're going to make some changes as I think it'll evolve, but I don't know why it would go away. That we still operate in theory in the public interest, convenience, and necessity, and you have to do some stuff that the news sort of falls under. And I don't know. I watch Diane's show every night, and I very much enjoy it. I like it a lot, and Diane's been kind enough to come back from Joplin tomorrow and speak to my class on the World News set, and they're very excited about it. And
Nice.
so all of these things you hear about infighting and stuff like that, I think it sells a lot of papers, and it's great for the blogs, but I very much admire Diane Sawyer, and she's told me that she has her staff listen to the way we write things, and mutual respect, and I hope they don't go away. What I hope is that more journalists are employed, not fewer journalists. I hope that all these big companies can figure out that you can be a little bit leaner and a little bit smarter and still get it done. You just got to not get some of the fat out, and we could use some slimming down from time to time.
Right, we're running out of time here. Go ahead. You.
Print media's had a hell of a time
Awful.
being in contention with, I'll start over. Print media's had a hell of a time being in contention with the internet. How has the internet these days affected your program and news in general, taking into consideration how things have evolved technologically?
Well, I think a good example of that is in the back of the room. At Ole Miss, they've got a new multimedia discipline and a new college of multimedia, the Meek School of Multimedia Journalism, I think it's called. One of the things that I'm trying to impress upon them, and their teacher, Deb Winger, is trying to impress upon them, is that you have to know how to do it all now. Where when I was first coming up, you would go out, you'd search for the soundbite, you'd search for the nat sound, you'd wrap it around it, here's your minute 15, great, have a nice day. Now you got to have that. You have to have a longer version of the interview. You have to have a written version of it that'll work on the website, maybe with a multimedia slideshow, and you have to produce all of that, and it needs to come out of your backpack. And you need to have all of these skills, and basically what you need to be is a very good communicator. So I think, though, we're in a period of transition, and it's a difficult period for all of us. Us olds are having to learn new skills. And a lot of the time, we're learning it from the kids in the back of the room. And I think the more platforms we're working on, the better communicators we can become. If I now have to understand how to put this in the written word and make it consumable, where you can back up and reread a sentence, where in TV I've always, it's the other way around. If I can learn to do it in all those formats, then I think everybody wins. If I can do a minute and 15 on television or 40 seconds on television, send them to the web for the 7-minute interview, and to a synopsis written with still pictures that go with it, if you're really interested in that subject, then we've got a lot for you now. It doesn't help us at the moment, but I think down the road it's going to make us better journalists, and That's what we all want to be anyway. I know it's financially challenging, and sorry, I'm sorry it's changed, but their cameras cost a lot less too, so they'll figure it out. They got plenty of money. I'm
You
long-winded,
had
I'm
mentioned,
sorry.
excuse me, you had mentioned that there's 18 or 19 and a half minutes of airtime
18 and a half minutes of commercials.
of commercials.
Yes.
How much influence do you have as an anchor as to what is actually going to air during the live time?
A lot. My executive producer, Kim Rosenberg, here on the front row, sort of chooses everything, and we have a big plate to work off of. I mean, we have networks all over the world and newspapers all over the world and wire services and feed services and access to just about anything we want. It's where we may not have 1 million people in our staff, but we have a lot of resources to pull from, and we try to give you a mix of the day's events. I can say, no, we're not doing this story, or I want to do this story, and it happens. I mean, that's within the bounds of what I don't do that a lot. I like the system that we have. I can't do it all. I'm not a micromanager. There was a time when I was, because we had such a small staff. Britt Hume has said famously, ours is a teaching hospital. And you better be a good surgeon and a good teacher, because you're going to have to do it all from time to time. But we've been lucky enough to bring in revenue and be able to hire more people, more layers of help, more layers of copy editing, so that I can let the staff do it for us. And that's the best way. And that way, when everything starts hitting the fan, I have time to dig in, where they're all committed to what they're already doing. So yesterday, for instance, once again, the world started falling apart. We can concentrate on what's breaking now and how to get information here, and this one's monitoring Twitter, and this one's monitoring this newspaper, and this one has a source there, and this one has a source there, so we have enough resources to free everything up. I think micromanaging young journalists is a mistake. I think you have to let them learn to make their own mistakes on the slow day, so that on the busy day, they'll know what mistakes are, they'll know the difference, and it's worked out brilliantly for us.
Okay, the sand has run out here. I just want to ask you one. I totally failed to ask you about Osama bin Laden. Did you?
I heard
you
he's dead.
Do you believe it?
Oh yeah, why wouldn't I believe it?
No, but did you get called in, or were you? I was so shocked that they finally got him. I mean, what about the reaction? Were you surprised at the reaction to
I
it?
was stunned by the reaction. What I always try to do when they make you go overseas is get a few days of vacation around it, because you're already there. They paid for that big, expensive first-class plane ticket. Let's work it. So
Remember that.
if you can, if they can give you time off. So I took, Jonathan Hunt, one of our correspondents, Adisa Bekele, my stage manager, we hopped over to Barcelona for a few days. We figured, why not R&R for a minute? We got there in the afternoon on Sunday, local time there, and in the middle of the night while we're sleeping, the phones are ringing. It's time to come home for Osama bin Laden. And on the first flight the next day, and we haven't heard anything. We got to get packed and get to the thing, and da-da-da-da, and they're speaking Spanish anyway. So, I get a little Spanish, but Miami Spanish, So we get to the airport, there are no TVs up, and we get on the plane, there's no Wi-Fi on the jet, and we get home and land, and I go straight home, put on the TV clothes, go straight to ground zero, and lo and behold, I don't know what I expected. I don't think I ever really thought about getting him. I had all kinds of conspiracy stuff in my head about it. I mean, didn't we all on some level? But I'd never thought about what it would be like. I'll tell you one thing, though, that as journalists that I'm surprised we haven't heard more of. They brought senators in to see these pictures. They brought journalists in to watch Tim McVeigh die, and they brought politicians in to watch Tim McVeigh die, so that we could then tell the people who trust us for information what just happened. I'm not trying to get an eyeball on the Osama bin Laden pictures, but I think some of the people in our industry, I think they should have had it, and that's just my opinion. But I think that the fifth estate, the people who go to the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post every day to read the work of people they trust, or come to ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox or whatever, I think some of these journalists who are guardians of the public trust and the first documenters of history should have an eyeball on those things. And I'm surprised that more people in our industry haven't said a journalist should look at this, or a journalist or two should look at this. Because I think we should. I think it's part of our role in this society, and I think that's how the people who set it all up would have wanted it.
You are an easy interview.
I talk too long, I know this.
I've done a lot of them, and you're an amazingly articulate guy. you really, the ideas that you have about this business are so well formulated. I'm embarrassed to think of how poorly mine are.
Oh, please, that's so nice of you.
But I think you did a fabulous job of covering the landscape here, and I think we owe them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.